How to read. This is probably a stupid video. Probably not the best, most interesting, most exciting topic, but this is something that I've learned recently about myself that I just suck at reading. I don't read correctly. Like, I read and then I don't remember what I read. Like, I can literally read an entire page, sometimes even I feel like an entire chapter, and I just don't even recall what happened. It's just like I'm glazing over and reading words. Words are entering my eyeball, and I'm perceiving the word, but I'm not actually piecing together the words. And this is kind of weird, right? Like, surely we know how to read. Surely we know how to actually do this basic elementary skill. But I genuinely don't think most of us do. I genuinely don't think that most of us read correctly. There's principles that make reading more enjoyable, make it easier to learn, make it more efficient, make it so that we don't have to have reading as this big amorphous chore that we have to do, right? It becomes this thing that you look forward to. It becomes something that you genuinely value so highly in your life, right? You just want to talk to people about the books that you've read. You just want to give out books like fucking candy, right? That is the identity that I will hopefully help you to adopt, because my goodness, being a reader, knowing how to read is such a powerful skill. Like, at a deep level, knowing how to read is such a high leverage skill. And if you can adopt it, if you can adopt this identity, then you will make so much progress. Because if you look at the patterns of behaviors amongst every single successful person to ever live, they've all read. I mean, some of the especially successful ones in recent times. I mean, fucking like a Warren Buffett, right? Reads for 4 to 6 hours a day, right? I mean, he might be reading annual reports, really boring annual reports, but hey, he's still doing it. And trust me, I don't think a young Warren Buffett was reading annual reports and that fascinated in it. He had to train himself and get the muscle in order to allow himself to have the discipline to read those annual reports. So it's not like he was just naturally born to love annual reports. No, that's not the case at all. But he was able to adopt the skill set that allows him to read those annual reports and have the passion to read them and to use what he learns as leverage in his investments, right? So let's get into it. How to read. The first principle is to know your objective. This is really up to you, right? People read for different reasons, and all the power to each direction you decide to take. You can take the self-improvement route. You can take the building a business route. You can take the skill acquisition route. You can take the passion route. You can take the curiosity route. Emotions, genre, whatever it is, right? Whatever you're into, whatever your goal is, you have to be clear on it, because if you're not clear on what objective you are reading for, like why you're reading these books, like why you want to get into reading, when you don't allow yourself to get into that mindset, then you're just aimlessly wandering around. You're reading books because other people told you to read them. You're not actually reading books because you want to read them. And it kind of sucks to see that, to see people that just read because it's a popular book, it's a classic book, it's a book that everyone else is reading, it's a famous book, like by a famous person. It's so painful, right? It's so painful, because then you just don't have direction. You're not reading something out of your own motivation, right? You're not looking deep within your soul and digging and trying to align what you desire with some piece of art, with a book, with literature. And so this principle is so important. This is the first thing you should do. This is the top of mind. It's know your objective. Know why you're actually reading the thing. Because if you know why you're reading it, then it makes it so much easier to narrow down what you actually want to read, right? Instead of just reading 20 different types of books from 20 different genres by 20 different types of people with 20 different intentions. You're reading just a few books from a few authors that are directly aligned with your goals, right? With what you want to do, with your objective. And so whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is, right? Like I said, it can be self-improvement, it can be skill acquisition, it can be building a business, passion, whatever it is. Just pick one, pick a few, what you're interested in genuinely, and just do it. Just go all in. Get books that relate to that, and instantly you'll escape the mistake, the pitfall of just reading every single book under the sun, regardless of genre, and just wasting time. The next principle is to read during your shallow / so-called lazy periods of the day. So I like to view our days as like peaks and valleys, right? Peaks and troughs. And when you wake up, or I guess it depends on your chronotype. So if you're a morning person, when you wake up and you've had your coffee or whatever, you hit like a really high peak at some point, right? Where you're at peak performance, you're locked in, you can just work, you're focused, you're not distracted by anything, your output is incredibly efficient for your time input. You're just working like an absolute machine, a well-oiled machine. And then this is obviously not sustainable because we're human, we're mortal, we're biological. And so eventually you calm down. You calm down into a trough, into a valley. And this valley is disproportionate to the peak, right? Your peak is like this, it's short, but then the valley is like very, very extensive. It's not your moments of focus and deep work in the peak of the mountain of the wavelength, right, is shorter than your valley. Your valley, aka your shallow work, the moments whenever you're lazy. For me, I'm a morning person, so naturally after lunch in the afternoon, I'm feeling the most slow, the most lazy, and so that's when you need to start doing shallow work. That's whenever you need to do work that doesn't require like close to 100% of your focus and attention and energy. And this is whenever you can actually learn. This is when you fill that space of shallow work with learning, reading, listening to podcasts, studying, right? That is when you do it. Because some people will try to read like whenever, like if you're a night person, your chronotype's night, then your peak of the day is going to be at night. And then you might have a valley before then or after, like when you go to bed. And so you need to realize that you have a chronotype and you need to leverage it. And during these periods of valleys, right, in the low points, this is the opportunity for you to read. This is the best opportunity for you to read because your brain's kind of fried. It's been through the day. It's done the daily tasks, and now you're kind of tired. You're a little bit groggy. You're a little bit slow. You're not as sharp. And now is the perfect time to read. Now is the perfect time to learn because your mind is going to be receptive to it because it's a jello-y from working like in the valley in the peak time. So now in the valley, you have the opportunity to just learn, spend that time reading, lay back and read, dude. This was the biggest freeing moment for me because I used to think that I'd have to work through the peak and then keep working through the valley. There is time for that. There is a season of your life where you need to do that. Okay, I understand that. But for most people, for the type A personalities that have been in a perpetual cycle of trying to extend their valley as long as possible, extending their peak as long as possible, you need some valleys. You need a period of valleys. Otherwise, we all know what it leads to, right? When you try to sustain a peak for way too long, you come crashing down deep, deep, deep into a really steep valley, into a really perpetualized valley that seems to never end, called burnout. And it's really painful. It genuinely is painful to go through burnout. I think that that's where burnout comes from. It's whenever you try to maintain a level of work, whenever you're physically not and mentally not, when you're at your limit, when you're stretched thin and you're at capacity, you just get stuck in this valley. Like you're literally gonna be stuck in your bed. You cannot bring yourself to work, and so this is why it's not good to just work your face off for a really long time and go beyond your capacity. There is a moment for that. I understand. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that sometimes, because there are times when that is the best outcome, the best input that you can do for yourself. But in most cases, for most people right now, you don't need to do that. Okay, maybe you're a type B person that has a work ethic problem, then maybe you need to work your face off. Maybe you do need to work 16 hours a day straight at peak levels. Maybe that you are that person. But if you're not, if you've already been at peak and you feel yourself starting to dip down and lose that same fire, then you might be risking teetering into burnout, And burnout is literally prevents you from working. It prevents you from making progress at all. It zeroes out everything. So you don't want to burn out. So instead, embrace the valley. Start your descent slowly and gradually into the valley and enjoy it, right? Spend the time that day reading the fucking book, learning, taking the course, getting better. And a way you can reframe this is that your shallow work builds upon your deep work, right? It builds. It's a foundation. It builds more skills that allow you to level up your deep work even more. Your deep work becomes more efficient because during your shallow work, you learn how to do something better, right? So they build upon each other. The next principle is to read multiple things at the same time to stay interested. So I know at the beginning I was saying don't read 20 different things at the same time, but if you have your objective in mind and you know kind of what purpose you're reading books for, then you can buy it, or you can start reading a bunch of those books within that niche, within that category of books that you have objectively directionalized, and then you can basically decide, okay, so now I can read all these books. I don't have to be confined to one single book, because here's the big thing about reading, right? If you pick up a book, or you buy a book, and you open it and it's just kind of boring, and it's hard to get into it, then it's very hard to establish the habit of learning, to establish the muscle of reading, right? You won't really have an incentive to do it. You won't feel a burning desire to want to read anymore. Like it makes it hard to build the identity, to craft the identity of someone that reads whenever you don't want to read the book. So when you have multiple books, you can just come back and bounce around from one to the next, and it helps you to build a more well-rounded interpretation of the thing you're trying to learn, right? It satisfies your curiosity in all cylinders. It helps you learn a skill from multiple perspectives, from multiple experts, right? And so you're not just reading one author's perspective that could be very biased in one direction, within a context that's very narrow. Instead, you're taking in information from every single direction within this niche. So you're getting multiple authors' perspectives in multiple contexts, and that allows you to then make a decision for your own situation. Within your context, you can make a decision based off what you learned, right? It's really, really powerful to read multiple books at the same time. Finally, this is my favorite principle: slow your roll, slow down. You don't have to just rush through and speed read and just knock out books. I've heard of the people that flex how many books that they've read during the year, but I think it's almost a bigger flex to say that you've read a book multiple times, that you've read a book like a dozen times, because people can flex all day about how they read 100 books this year, how they read 100 books, but how much did their life actually change, right? How much of their behavior did they actually change by reading those 100 books? It's really a interesting phenomenon in America, especially, where we just attach goals to outcomes, to material, to numbers, right? To tangible outcomes that we can see and wrap our arms around, right? Reading 100 books, doing this, doing that. Instead of just reading the books again and again to like learn and out of curiosity and just to like change the texture of our minds, we just read because we want to hit the goal of 100 books. We just want to read so that on my Kindle, so that I can see the percentage points on the book completion just go up slowly and slowly. Like it's I get why people do it. It's like it gives you a motivation to just read, but I think the next level beyond that is just to detach yourself from an outcome, of that level, right? Detach yourself from the outcome of, I want to read because I want to hit this number of books read, or I want to see that tick up in the percentage on my Kindle. No. If you're able to detach yourself from that and just read because for the sake of it, for the purity of the literature, for the lessons that you're picking up from it, then you get so much more out of reading, right? You can pick up a single book and get the same amount of value that someone else would get from reading 10, right? And then the real magic becomes where you can read books again and again and get more and more out of them. I can go into a whole spiel about that, but I'll leave you with this. Knowing how to read is going to change your life. Most people think they know how to read. They've been taught how to do the physical act of reading, but nobody has stopped to ask themselves, what behaviors allow me to get the most out of reading and allow me to adopt the identity of a reader? And the way you do this is by knowing your objective. What is the purpose behind your reading? And then figuring out how to fit in reading into your day within your valleys, within the points of your day where you're less focused, when you're less energized, right? Fitting reading into those times, learning into those times, and then reading multiple books at the same time so you can get a diverse range of perspectives, so that you're not just getting one narrow focus, and then slowing down so that you can really absorb something instead of just reading a bunch of books just to say you did it. Goodbye.